Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. After Saturday's weather here in the Detroit area, I think most of us understand why the spring game was canceled. It was a nasty weekend with monsoon rains, some ice, and even some snow. It was still a productive weekend, though, as the team moved indoors to scrimmage and entertained some elite talent on a very important recruiting day. This week, the team wraps up their 15 practices and gets ready for the trip to France. As is usually the case in the spring, very tough to take anything away from these practices. No one has seen this team take a snap. We've heard what coaches and players have said about the workouts, and as you might expect, they all tell us great progress has been made, and we hope so. Beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive will join us in just a minute with his thoughts on spring practice, Shea Patterson, and much more. First, a few news and notes to get us started. Spring game weekend has always been big for recruiting. It seems we always generate a few verbals on or shortly after the game. This year, of course, there was no game, just that indoor practice. By Monday morning, we had two high-profile commits, moving the class of 2019 up to number 4 nationally, number 1 in the Big Ten. I know it's only April, and there is a long way to go with this class, but it is off to a very good start. On Sunday afternoon, Michigan flipped 4-star defensive back to Corey Couch. He had been committed to Tennessee. He is on the smaller side, 5'9", 150 pounds, but had offers from plenty of the big-time programs. He attends Chaminade Madonna High School in Hollywood, Florida. On Monday morning, we picked up another offensive line commit, our third in this class, 6'5", 280-pound Jack Stewart from New Canaan, Connecticut. He is a 3-star and rated the 7th best player in that state. After practice ends this week, most of the team will pack up, get on the plane, and head to France for a week of sightseeing and bonding. There might not be as much fanfare as last year's Rome trip, but it's still a very big deal for these kids and the program. My guest today will be traveling with the team, and we look forward to his coverage next week. Aaron McMann from MLive joins us next here on the Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Back with us on our game day segment this week after quite a while is a beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Aaron, it's great to talk to you again.
Yeah, it's good to be back, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Well, we say this every year, Aaron. Fans are excited about spring practice when it gets underway. But in reality, other than injuries and the spring game, we don't learn much about the team this year. No spring game. That kind of makes your job a lot tougher, though, Aaron, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I've been talking about this all week, really. Last year, even, the media got, not only spring game, but even they had 3 practices overseas in Italy that were open. So really had, 4 good looks at the team and the players on the roster and everything else. It's a good opportunity to see some of the younger guys, just to see how they're, maybe fitting in or developing or how they're looking. In this case, in this season, we don't really get that. We're kind of going off with what the players and fellow teammates and the coaching staff is saying. And it's not to, disregard what they're saying, but, they oftentimes like to put, a positive spin on things, and that's cool. But yeah, we didn't get a look. They decided to cancel the spring game for weather concerns, and rightfully so. The weather wasn't great on Saturday. And they ended up moving things inside for their indoor closed situational scrimmage. They let family members of players and coaches in, and they had recruits in and everything else. But yeah, by the time spring practice ends next week, no one, media, fans, no one will have seen anything from this team.
And that's very true. And most years after the spring game, we talk until practice starts in August, primarily about what we saw in the spring game. So this year we don't even have that. And I'm not sure that's a bad thing, though. No, and like you said, I don't think you gathered much from spring game. It's more or less, just a glorified scrimmage, glorified practice. The coaches don't like to,
show much. They're not going to show much the playbook. They're not going to show much the personnel groupings. It's more or less, sending a bunch of guys out there to run around and do some stuff for a couple hours. And I think in this case, Big Ten Network was supposed to televise the events. And in fact, I think Michigan had scheduled their thing, the whole event around being ready for the TV camera, so to speak. So, it's like you mentioned, it's glorified practice, something for the fans and everything else. So at the end of the day, you don't learn much.
Even though there was not a game, the team did scrimmage indoors Saturday in front of family, and there was still a lot of big-time recruits in town for the weekend too, Aaron, so that was important.
Absolutely. That always is. It's one of those things where they get a lot of guys in, a lot of guys they're looking at, a lot of guys that are maybe on the fence about Michigan. The spring game's unique too in that regard because, Michigan obviously always draws big crowds at the big house and everything else for the spring game, and they didn't really get that this year. Since they moved everything in, everything was a closed environment. That things might have been a little bit more intimate for the recruits, so maybe that's a good thing in that regard. But at the same token, you don't get to usher the recruits out in front of 40, 50, 60, however many thousand people decided to show up for this game, for the spring game. So it's a catch-22. The recruits got to see Michigan, and they got to see, I'm sure, everything, but they didn't get to experience the full atmosphere inside Michigan Stadium.
One of the visitors, the recruits flipped to Michigan after the visit. Four-star defensive back to Corey Couch from Hollywood, Florida. He is a nice pickup. Yeah.
He came out Sunday afternoon, decided to make his announcement. I think he's 5'9.5", 148. So he's a little on the small side. He's obviously got some time to grow and everything else. He's a 4-star defensive back. I think he played a little corner. Someone had him listed at safety. Another recruiting service had him listed as an athlete. So I suppose he could play elsewhere. He's obviously a guy Michigan liked him and the other teams did. I think he had 24 scholarship offers. He was obviously he had committed to Tennessee over the summer. Others like Michigan State and Oklahoma were after him, and in some ways still are. So no, it was a big pickup for Michigan. I think that jumped them to top 5 nationally when it comes to rankings for their 2019 recruiting class. Number 1 in the Big Ten. Number 5 nationally. They got 1 5-star. They've got 6 or 7 4-stars at this point. So far, so good when it comes to the 2019 class.
Well, Aaron, none of us saw a snap this spring, of course, but the players, as you had mentioned, were made available a few times to talk to the media. And, one word I heard and read a lot from the offensive guys was simplifying. It sounds like Jim and the staff have been trying to make this, and for lack of a better term, a more user-friendly offense for the players, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what we've kind of gathered. When talking to the offensive linemen, some of the receivers and everything else, the playbook has just been simplified, especially with the offensive line. Something we saw them really struggle with last year. I think under Tim Drevno, I think things were so complicated. And this was brought up the other day with for the linemen, but they made the comment that maybe when they got to the line of scrimmage last year, for a play during a game, the linemen maybe had 5 or 6 reads to look at from the defense, and now they've simplified it down to maybe 2 or 3. So there's less thinking involved. Guys know what they're doing right away. And when you got a young team or an inexperienced team like Michigan had last year, I think it makes a difference. Guys' heads aren't spinning, they're not overthinking, and I think that's what you saw a lot of last season. Between that and Ed Warner's come in, and he seems like he's done a good job of evaluating guys and kind of putting them in 1 or 2 spots as opposed to 3 or 4, which we saw last year also under Tim Drevno. And that's not to knock Drevno. Obviously, he's had a long history and a long tenure and everything else. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to a young team, like I mentioned, a young roster and experience, those things matter. So they've really gone back to basics, so to speak, here early in spring. They evaluated what they have and who they have, and maybe where they fit best. And it sounds like, and obviously we're going off the players and everything else, but so far so good. It's kind of been a clean slate for everyone.
In particular, we've been hearing that the young receivers really struggled with their roles in the offense last year. You did a piece last week on Oliver Martin, and he said that. Jim McElwain seems to think that entire group is getting better. And, I think in large part that may be because they have a receivers coach this year, Aaron.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things when McElwain had brought on, and even before him, Dan Enos briefly. Michigan didn't really have a dedicated receivers coach last season. You had Pep Hamilton working with them, obviously. You had some GAs working with them. But there was I don't think there's one real guy they could kind of go to and rally around. Now they've got that with Jim McElwain. Obviously he's coming off being a head coach at Florida and everything else. But like there's a dedicated guy there. There's someone they can go to and talk to all the time and get advice from and everything else. I really think of most of of all the position groups on this team, especially last season, I think it was one of the spots where I think Michigan desperately needed someone to kind of oversee and lead. They had plenty of young guys over there playing true freshmen, sophomores. They got a lot of playing time last year. Having McElwain there, I think, is bodes well for this group. I'm thinking they're going to take a big leap between Donovan Peoples-Jones and Tariq Black. He's healthy and ready to go again. And you got several other guys back there. Oliver Martin, like you mentioned, Nico Collins. I think of all the position groups on this team, this has the potential to be, maybe have the biggest improvement next season.
We heard Jim say, in years past, he even said it last year that he wanted his offensive defense to be like a 33rd NFL team. So I think it's true with the reevaluation he did over the spring and the winter months. That might be good when you have a veteran team, but it looks like as part of their review process was definitely the conclusion that they needed to just, for all those position groups, make it a lot more simple.
Yeah, and I think it would have, boded well, especially last season. We talked about this all year, how young that team was and how inexperienced they were, how maybe they had lack of starting experience. Sometimes it's better just to go back and kind of simplify things, go back to basics. And I think that should bode well for this team in 2018.
Injuries in spring, always a concern. So far, knock on wood, Ben Mason has been the only serious injury. Meniscus injuries or tears aren't what they used to be. The repair process is much better. And from what it sounds like, Aaron, he is expected back by the time camp starts.
Yeah, he'll be back. Tyrone Wheatley, I think, suffered injury as well. He kind of early in spring, so I think he'll miss the rest of spring practice as well. But for the most part, from what we've been able to gather, Michigan's been relatively, scare-free with injuries, especially those key positions. With Wheatley and even Ben Mason, Michigan's pretty deep at tight end and fullback and everything else, and running back. So they've got plenty of bodies there. There's really no concern, and that's a nice thing too. Like you mentioned, it's spring. They've got time to recover over the summer. And you have fall camp. So I guess if you're getting injured, maybe now might be the best time to do it.
Well, for the second spring in a row, the Lavert Hill has missed most of spring practice. And from a piece you did last week, with Coach Zordich, he came off as if he was unsure why Lavert wasn't practicing. What is your read on that situation?
Yeah, that was a real interesting one. Mike Zordich is known, obviously, for not holding back and giving his thoughts. Like I can remember, last year during fall camp, him coming out, and I think it was a week or two before the season opener against Florida, and him being upset about, how his quarterbacks were playing. So he's not afraid to make his opinions known. He came out last week and pretty much was critical of Lavert Hill. Lavert, I guess, has missed all but the first two spring practices with some sort of hip or growing issue. Zordich didn't really know what. So that tells me that maybe they haven't really gotten a look at what his injury is. Maybe Hill doesn't want them to look at it. But at the end of the day, he just hasn't participated. I think that's what's frustrated Zordich the most. Hill is a talented kid, obviously. He was part of, Michigan's number one ranked pass defense last year. He's expected to start again at corner this year. But at the same token, I think Zordich realizes all that, and I think he's just frustrated that Hill isn't, maybe wanting to practice more. But again, the same token, I haven't seen the injury, no one's seen it, so they don't really know how severe it is. Zordich is an NFL guy. He wants guys to kind of fight through that stuff and play through it. And I feel like he feels Hill doesn't want to do that.
With us here on our Game Day segment this week is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive, talking about spring practice, which is wrapping up this week. Aaron, the offensive line has been a focus this spring. We knew it would be. A new offensive line coach in Ed Warner. And from what we hear, Aaron, the interior of that unit pretty much set. But who will man the tackle positions? That's still a mystery, isn't it?
It is, and there's several guys, up for grabs there. Some of which, a couple of which, got significant playing time last year. The interior, it was always a question mark, but you knew there were bodies there to fill the spot, over the off season. You could theorize the place and everything else, but it sounds like that's pretty much been set. Like you mentioned, they've got Cesar Ruiz, who they're intending to sit there for the rest of his playing career at Michigan. He was a natural center when they recruited him. They played him at guard and maybe a little bit of tackle last year, kind of more as a feeling out process. But the entire goal eventually was to move him back to center. They've done that. Ben Bredesen is sticking at left guard. Sounds like Michael Onwenu is going to play at right guard. He saw a lot of playing time last year at that position, started several games. But the tackle position has several guys kind of rotating in and out of there. Jawan Bushell-Beatty's up there. John Runyon Jr., Noah Ulizio, Chuck Filiaga, James Hudson's name has come up, Andrew Stuver. So there are several guys working at both positions. It sounds like they're in talking to Runyon and Bushell-Beatty last week. It sounds like they're rotating at both spots. And the tackle position was, especially on the right side, was an area of concern last year. Michigan's pass protection was not very good, and a lot of the problems did stem from that right side, that guard and tackle spot. I think they're pretty happy about guard. Tackles obviously remain a question mark. Mason Cole did a fine job at left tackle last year. He was still playing out of position a little bit, knowing that he's going to play center or guard in the NFL. But I think if Michigan can solidify that tackle spot, find two consistent guys, that play well under pass protection, because at the end of the day, that's really where Michigan's line struggled last year. They ranked 90th in tackles for loss allowed. I feel like I've been a broken record. I've written this several times in the last few months, and 110 in sacks allowed. Pass protection just was not good. Obviously, the quarterbacks obviously didn't play well. There was obviously struggles with the receivers, but at the end of the day, when you've got constant pressure coming to the quarterback, it doesn't make their life any easier. So Michigan's got some things to figure out at the tackle spot. But they've got several bodies. They've got several guys to figure out there. And they've got plenty of time to do it as well.
Well, a question that has been asked this spring, Aaron, is will Grant Newsome be cleared to play this year? From your understanding, Aaron, and I know that it's been hard to glean any information on that topic, is there even a remote chance he is going to be cleared?
I think there is. It sounds like he hasn't been, denied yet. We've talked to him a couple of times. We talked to him a couple of times over the off season. I can remember one instance. I think it was January or February. They were at a public event at Children's Hospital in Ann Arbor, but Grant was expecting to hear something back from his doctors relatively soon. Apparently, he hasn't gotten that yet. He's been going through rehab. I know that he's basically completed it. He went through full winter conditioning with his teammates. He did everything with them, I guess. So it sounds like he's doing everything he was able to do before. He said he felt good and wanted to play again. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the doctors and whether they think, playing again is good for that left knee that he severely damaged. I could see it. I can envision a scenario where he is cleared to play and allowed to play and everything else. But then it comes down to whether or not he's the same player as he was, 2 years ago when he suffered that knee injury. Michigan, needs someone responsible. Obviously, on the left side of the line, that's not to say Grant can't play because he'd probably be fine and everything else. But I have to question his speed and his ability to, that range of motion and everything else he had a couple of years ago. If someone doesn't, it's tough for someone to go through an injury like that nearly. And we've heard the story before. He nearly had to have his leg amputated and everything else. To going from that to playing every day again. He had a bright future when he played a couple of years ago. He looked very good. And I think Michigan would love to have him back. But at the end of the day, how effective is he going to be? And I think he realizes that. I think the coaching staff knows that. So we're kind of wait and see. I think obviously we'll get an answer. I'd assume over the summer. We thought we'd have one for the spring. We haven't gotten it. But by everything I've heard, he continues to work out. And in fact, he's taken a little bit of player coaching as well. A lot of the assistant coaches have marveled at the job he's done, just watching tape and giving advice and letting the coaches know about things. He's a very bright individual. If you talk to him, people joke that he could be the future next president. But he's in good spirits. It's a tough situation for anyone, I think, especially for him. Because you want to play football and everything else. But at the end of the day, you've got to weigh your knee and everything else.
Well, who will be under center this fall is also a mystery, Aaron. We hear Shea Patterson has looked very good this spring. We've only heard that from players, of course. But until his status is cleared up, it makes it tough to name a starter, doesn't it?
It does. And it's something, and I kind of feel for Harbaugh and the coaching staff, not knowing about, Patterson's eligibility. So they're kind of having to go through, the spring, with three guys that could potentially be a starter next year. So I'm sure it's made things difficult for them just in terms of snap distribution and everything else. But it sounds like between him and Brandon Peters and Dylan McCaffrey, all three have really gotten equal reps. We haven't gotten to see anything. We've heard good things. One of the things we keep hearing about from the players is how each one of them does something differently, better. Patterson, we've heard about his mobility and ability to make plays out of the pocket and scramble and things like that. I'd assume that he brings that little different wrinkle to the Michigan offense, I think, which helps. In terms of him throwing the ball and his accuracy and everything else, obviously we'll leave that up to see. We're not privy to all that stuff. It's an interesting off season for Brandon Peters because he started 4 games last year and was thought to be maybe the guy in 2018 before Patterson arrived. He's got a big spring, I think, to prove that he still can be the guy because if Patterson is ruled out ineligible by NCAA, and it's quite possible at this point, Peters could be the guy. I mean, he's got the most experience on staff starting. He's familiar with the playbook. He's been through this before. And then you got Dylan McCaffrey, who's been highly touted since Michigan got him. He redshirted last season. By all accounts, has a very good arm, very good knowledge of the game. His brother played he's in the NFL and everything else, so it's been well documented as well. I think that they're looking pretty good for the future. They've just got to settle on someone, and it seems like this has been a thing for the last several years now between quarterback competitions and not knowing who the guy is going to be. But absolutely, I think Patterson's eligibility will be step one in determining all that. I suspect we'll hear something soon here in the next week or two. It's basically come down to an NCAA decision. They've got everything that they need. There's been obviously a lot of back and forth between Patterson's agent Thomas Mars and University of Mississippi over their objection to him not getting a waiver to be able to play. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the NCAA has everything that they need. They're reviewing all that, and then they're going to have to make a decision.
Well, in other news, Aaron, last week Wilton Speight made the decision to play his 5th year at UCLA, and that was after some talk he might stay here in Ann Arbor for his 5th season. What are your thoughts on his situation?
Yeah, I was glad he's able to land somewhere. That was, I guess, the concern. You didn't really see his name pop up anywhere in terms of visits or anything else. And like you mentioned, there was talking possibly coming back. He says he's healthy. He says he's able to play. He's got 1 year eligibility remaining, and he's able to find a home. Obviously, when you're a grad transfer, it's unique because you're obviously looking for the right fit in the program you want to go to, but you've got to gauge and look at their quarterback situation, whether or not he's going to get to play or not. He's got 1 year left. He's not looking to go somewhere to necessarily sit on the bench. He wants to start. He wants to play. UCLA has an opening. It's a good school. It's a Power 5 school. I think it was favorable to him. It was out on the West Coast as well. He's been working out, I know, in Los Angeles for the last few months after graduation. So I guess it seemed like a good fit for him. They've got several quarterbacks on their roster, including a grad transfer that's coming in from Washington as well. So you can have some competition, but there is no clear-cut favorite out there. And it's probably the best situation for him right now.
Absolutely. And the best of luck to Wilton. I'm sure he will make the most of it and show people he is, I think, a much better quarterback than we saw early last year and then when he was injured. So I would not be surprised if he's the starter out there, Aaron.
No, he's definitely got the talent and ability. I'm curious to see how he bounces back from the vertebrae in the back and everything else. He seems like he's healthy. I can remember him posting a picture on Twitter after the season and him kind of swinging a golf club. I think to show people and prove that his back is fine and his range of motion is fine, everything else. But I hope he's able to bounce back. That's a tough injury. That's something that not everyone's able to come back from, and he did it pretty quickly and swiftly. I think as we all saw on the Amazon Prime show, he worked his butt off and got back and he wanted to play again. He just, it just wasn't going to work for Michigan. They were rolling Peters and things were looking up and everything else. But no, he gets one last opportunity. Like I said, he'll be able to play right away in 2018, and we'll see where the quarterback competition ends up out there at UCLA.
Well, again, it's the last week of spring practice for the team, and then it's off to France. So last year, of course, the team went to Italy. A ton of media coverage. It also helped they had 3 practices on that trip to Rome. There's something, though, Aaron, I don't sense that same enthusiasm from the media or the fans for this year's outing to France. Do you?
No, I think the wear or the allure has probably worn off with this. Last year, obviously, it was unique. It was the first time Michigan kind of had done something like that. And the fact that they were practicing overseas, like you said, I think made a big deal. It's not something most programs do or can afford to do. So it was a bigger deal. This year, it's going to be another team bonding event, and it largely was last season. I mean, they were there for a good week, 10 days, and they spent almost all day, every day, doing something, whether it was going to an attraction or going out to eat or practicing. They're always together pretty much all day, every day. I suspect that'll be the same again this year, just without the practices. They're going over there for a full week. They're spending most of the time in Paris, from what I understand. And they're going to spend, I think, a day at the beach in Normandy. So there's a lot on the plate, a lot planned. Some players, just like last year, won't go. We talked to a couple players last week. In fact, I think Jawan Bushell-Beatty was one who plans to graduate here. So in graduation weekend is next weekend. So you got to make a choice whether or not to walk across the aisle or go with this team to Paris. And the coaching staff leaves that up to the players. They can kind of decide. So Michigan will probably carry 70 to 80% of their guys. Some guys will choose to go home and see family, and because they don't really get to see much of that between the summer conditioning and off-season conditioning and everything else. So no, it's a good event for the players. The whole trip is privately funded, so it's they're allowed to do they'll do and see things that many of them probably won't ever do in their lives. It's a free trip, and it should be a good experience. It's Michigan did the Rome and Italy thing last year, and then they're doing France this year, and it sounds like this is going to be a yearly thing. At least that's kind of the plan. But no, it's an opportunity to take the players across the sea, across another country, and I think it works as a recruiting tool too. You can kind of, when you show recruits about Michigan facilities and everything else, you can also point to, hey, we're doing these weekly or these yearly spring trips to foreign locales.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, very good thing for recruiting. And I shouldn't have said the media isn't excited about going, because you get to go to this, and I bet you're looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am. I've never been to Europe. I've been in most of the U.S. and I've been in the Caribbean a couple of times and everything else. So it's gonna be a first trip to Europe. Looking forward to it. Don't know much French, so I've got to bone up on my language, but I'm looking forward. It should be fun.
I think it's going to be a great experience for everyone. When the season ended, Aaron, we heard Jim Harbaugh say he was going to reevaluate himself and his staff and make changes, and he did that. Now we're going to have to see what all of that means when the season starts, but it is interesting because even the players have been saying in the offseason, Jim's been a different kind of a guy this winter and spring, and the players seem to like that change in him, Aaron, from what we're hearing anyway.
Yeah, that was something we've heard. The first couple of weeks of practice, Jim kind of hinted that, he was, changed a little bit. He kept saying the team was rejuvenated. He was rejuvenated. And in talking to some of the players, it sounded like at the end of last year, he realized things didn't end well. He realized things didn't end on the note he wanted them to. So it sounds like they had some type of team meeting shortly after the Outback Bowl, and he basically told them, like, what do I need to do better? What do you want from me? It sounds like he saw input from the players, and they gave it. Details are scant. They didn't tell us much, but they changed things from a conditioning standpoint. They brought in team nutritionists and everything else. They've changed the way they eat and the things they eat, I guess. And Jim himself, I guess, has changed. He's apparently become more of a emotional, friendly, approachable guy. The joke is that he walks around asking for hugs now. I've seen that, but it sounds like he's making an attempt to be closer to the players. It's something to be more approachable because Jim has the reputation of being football all the time, all day, every day. And in some degree he still is, obviously, but I think that turns some people off at times. Guys get, they don't want to hear it sometimes. They want to, focus on something else. They think he's too hard on them, whatever the case may be. It sounds like Jim's making an attempt, to try to be a nicer guy, a more approachable guy. It sounds like it's worked. I obviously we're not behind the scenes, so we can't see any of that stuff, but it sounds like Jim had more of a reassessment period and looked back and realized maybe some things didn't work, and we'll see if it makes a difference or not in 2018.
Well, a final thought, Aaron. As we've been saying, spring practice comes to an end this week, as we know. Won't be long before the preseason magazines hit the shelves, believe it or not, and the focus is going to turn to the opener with Notre Dame. And the reality is we really won't have any idea what this team is or what they have become until they tee it up that night in South Bend, will we?
Yeah, that's about right. You go through camp and you get closer to the season opener, and you finalize rotations and starting spots and everything else, and you think you have an idea, and sometimes people do, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter until they step on the field. I can remember last fall, obviously ahead of the Florida game, there was so much concern about the experience and maybe the talent level on the offensive end and everything else, and you saw them go out and play what people thought was going to be a pretty good Florida team, and they beat them pretty good. Now, obviously, Florida didn't end up being that team that people thought, but it's tough to gauge things when you're not there watching. You're not there to compare. You're not there, to take things in, I guess, and that's what makes things so unique and so interesting. You're kind of spitballing at this point. I know the fan base is obviously going to always be optimistic and hope things go great and everything else. But you're right. It doesn't really matter. You don't know until you step on the field and play a football game. That season opener against Notre Dame is going to be important, just from, I think, a morale standpoint. After the way last season ended, Michigan's losing streak to end the year. I think a loss there would be tough just for everyone to swallow. But the same token, a win too, I think would change. Shut people up, so to speak. There's a lot of criticism, I'm sure a lot of pressure on Jim Harbaugh to win more. Obviously, the fan base wanted the Big Ten title. They want a playoff appearance and all that. And that first game one against Notre Dame will be a big test early on. It's not going to be a kick, a walk in the park, and it'll be a big game, important game.
We're looking forward to your coverage next week when the team goes over to France, so that should be interesting. The next time you and I chat, we'll be getting ready to tee it up, and it won't be long before the season, so we look forward to that. Our guest on today's show, on our Game Day segment this week, Aaron McMann, beat writer from MLive. As always, Aaron, it's great to have you on the show, and we look forward to our next visit right around the time the season starts.
Always. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, softball will be in East Lansing Tuesday to take on the Spartans. After going 6-6 through its first 12 games of the season, Michigan has won 29 of its last 30 games and each of its last 11. Michigan hit .225, averaged 2.9 runs per game, and combined for a 1.24 ERA over the first 12 games. Over the last 30 games, the Wolverines have posted a .354 batting average, averaged 6.8 runs per game, and posted a 1.01 team ERA. Freshman Megan Beaubien leads the nation with 25 wins, 3 more than North Carolina's Brittany Pickett and UCF's Aaliyah White, who is in second place and became the 6th freshman pitcher in program history to hit the 20-win milestone, doing so in just 28 total appearances. Beaubien leads the Big Ten in every pitching category, while she, senior Tara Blanco, and freshman Sarah Schaefer rank 1, 2, 3 in the Big Ten in both individual ERA and hits allowed per 7 innings. They will be home this weekend for a 3-game set with Maryland, then off to Indiana next weekend for a showdown with the Hoosiers, who are just a half game behind us heading into this week's play. Michigan is 35-7 overall, 10-1 in the Big Ten. Following a 4-hour, 18-minute weather delay, Michigan baseball clinched its 17th straight win on Saturday evening with a 6-3 victory over Maryland in the second and final game of the weekend series at the Wilpon Complex. Michigan has now won 17 games in a row, which marks a new record under head coach Eric Bakich, and is tied for the program's longest win streak since 1988, when the Wolverines won 18 straight. The series sweep is also Michigan's 5th straight. The Wolverines are 21-11 overall, 8-0 in the Big Ten, and will return to play on Friday when they open a Big Ten weekend series with Penn State. First pitch for the series opener is scheduled for 4 p.m. at the Wilpon Complex. Don't forget our free show app is available from both the Google Play and iTunes stores. You can also hear us on Stitcher, iHeart, TuneIn, Wolverine Sports Radio, and as of last week, we are on Spotify. If you get the show from iTunes, please take a minute to comment or rate the program. Thank you in advance. That will do it for another week. A quick program reminder for you. As many of you know, we are a weekly show from August through April, twice a week actually during football season, but from May through July, we slow it down to recharge the batteries and relax, enjoy some nice weather, if that ever happens around here. We don't go away though. I'll still have 2 shows a month for you, and we'll throw in a Michigan Man Extra each month. And I'll remind you of that again next week. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until next time, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!